12 chapters of the Old Testament in 2 minutes. Ready? Go. Okay. Abraham and his wife have left Ur, and they've settled first in Haran and then in Canaan, and they're old. They are above 70 years old, and Sarai probably a little younger than that. God speaks to both of them, says that despite their age and their condition, they will have kids, and that he'll protect and bless them through their kids. Meanwhile, a famine happens in Haran, and Abram and Sarai make their way to Egypt to survive. Not a command of God, but off they go on anyway. Problem though, Abram and Sarai know that Sarai is super duper good looking. She'll be taken by Pharaoh into his harem, and that Abraham will be killed. So they lie to Pharaoh and say that Sarai is Abraham's sister to spare his life, and it turns out it works. He gets a bunch of money and stuff for the sale of his sister, wife, who's now part of Pharaoh's harem. Turns out though, God's not cool with this. He sends some plagues to Egypt and speaks to Pharaoh that this is not Abram's sister, but his wife. They get kicked out of Egypt. They head back to Canaan where they're supposed to stay anyway, and God then again reminds them of the blessing of children, that he's going to do it, and that he's going to establish a covenant with them and through them, just like he said, a marker between them to ensure that God is faithful, and so too should Abram be. And guess what? He isn't. Abraham does not fulfill his covenant, his part of the plan. So Abram and Sarai hatch a plan to have kids. Sarah gives her slave Hagar to Abram to conceive a child with, which they do, Ishmael, but Sarah hates them both. Doesn't like them at all, sends them out to the desert to die, does not believe that God will provide, and spoiler alert, God's not cool with that also. He does spare their life and makes a covenant promise with them too. Meanwhile, God reminds both Sarai, who he renames Sarah, and Abram, who he renames Abraham, that he'll remain faithful to the promise of a son, just like he said, despite them being an absolute train wreck, an absolute gong show to this point. Abraham later tries again to fend off another king, Abimelech, with the same strategy, who wants to take Sarah, who once again is super duper good looking, by saying that she's his sister. It doesn't work again. Sarah is returned to Abraham, and God once again reminds them of and fulfills his promise. And despite their doubts, Sarah has a son, Isaac, who God says will be the beginning of the blessing of the world, from whom an entire nation will continue. And Abraham super duper loves him to his firstborn son. Oof.